A bushwalker pushing through the sandstone scrub west of Coutumba in the summer of 2019 was following a trail that shouldn't have existed. Not a wallaby pad, not a fire trace. Something else. Something cut too straight, angled too deliberately into the cliff face to be natural erosion. He took photos, sent them to a geologist friend in Sydney. The geologist didn't have an answer. She passed them on to a colleague. That colleague passed them on again. 4 people, all credentialed, all experienced in Australian geology and landscape formation, and none of them could explain what they were looking at. And that was just the beginning. The Blue Mountains of New South Wales stretch across more than 1 million hectares of rugged sandstone plateau, deep canyon country, and tangled eucalypt forest. Tourists come for the Three Sisters, for Wentworth Falls, for the cable car views that make you feel like you're hanging over the edge of the world. But the mountains have another dimension entirely, one that most guidebooks don't mention and that researchers are only beginning to map. Beneath the walking tracks, behind the cliff walls, and deep inside cave systems that swallow light whole, there are structures that don't fit the standard narrative of Australian prehistory. Some of them were clearly built, some were clearly shaped. Some appear to align with astronomical events in ways that would have required sophisticated planning across generations. And the oldest of them point to a human presence in these mountains, so ancient it forces a rethinking of everything we thought we knew about who was here first and what they were capable of. These are 10 ancient structures hidden beneath the Blue Mountains, and the story of what they might mean is stranger, deeper, and more significant than you've probably been told. Before we go further, the Blue Mountains sit on the traditional lands of the Gundungurra and Darug peoples, and their oral traditions have described hidden places in these ranges for as long as those traditions have been recorded. When elders speak of chambers beneath the escarpment, of tunnels that connect sacred places, of carvings made by ancestral beings in the time before time, they are not speaking in metaphor. They are transmitting geographical knowledge that in many cases has been independently confirmed by researchers who didn't know the traditions existed. That pattern, where Indigenous oral knowledge points to something verifiably real on the ground, keeps appearing in this story. It appeared at Uluru. It appeared in the Kimberley. It appears here too. Keep that in mind as we go through each of these sites. Structure number 1, the Govetts Leap alignment chambers. High above Govetts Leap Gorge, where the waterfall drops more than 180 meters into the canyon below, and the view stretches to the edge of the known world on a clear winter morning, there are 2 shallow cave systems in the sandstone wall that don't appear in any official geological survey. They were documented by an independent researcher, a geomorphologist named Alan Prescott, in 2011 after he noticed that the cave openings were positioned at an angle inconsistent with the natural weathering patterns of the surrounding cliff. Sandstone erodes predictably. Wind, water, and time produce rounded profiles, curved hollows, surfaces that slope away from the dominant weather direction. These 2 openings were different. Their edges were sharper than surrounding stone. Their floors were unnervingly level. And on the morning of the winter solstice, when Prescott returned with surveying equipment, he found that sunlight entered both chambers simultaneously at a specific angle and illuminated a back wall panel at exactly the same point. The probability of that occurring by natural formation is, in his own words, extremely low. Gundungurra elders, contacted for comment, confirmed that the area around Govetts Leap was considered deeply significant as a place of watching the sky. Whether the chambers were constructed, enhanced from natural features, or simply selected for their precise alignment with the seasonal sun, something deliberate happened here. Something that required knowledge and intention. Structure number 2, the Jenolan karst complex subsurface passages. Jenolan caves are one of Australia's most visited natural attractions. More than 2 kilometers of cavern open to the public, with stalactites, flowstone formations, and underground rivers that have been drawing visitors since the 1880s. What most visitors don't know is that the mapped caves represent less than a third of the estimated total cave system. Speleologists from the Cave Research Foundation have documented evidence of passages that terminate in what appear to be deliberately blocked entry points, walls of fitted stone that are compositionally different from the surrounding limestone. In at least 3 locations, the blocking material includes sandstone, a rock type that doesn't occur naturally at Jenolan, which sits in a limestone belt. Someone carried that sandstone in. The question of who, and from how far, and why they chose to seal those passages has no accepted answer. What makes this more interesting is a survey conducted in 2007 using ground-penetrating radar along the western face of the karst formation. It detected a series of regular void spaces approximately 12 meters below the current cave floor, in a pattern too geometrically consistent to be the product of random dissolution. Jenolan Caves management has acknowledged the survey results without formally commenting on their implications. That silence is itself a kind of answer. Structure number 3, the Blackheath sandstone terracing. About 2 kilometers northeast of Blackheath Township, in an area accessible only by a steep descent through thick scribbly gum woodland, there are sandstone formations that resemble agricultural terracing. Not the dramatic rice paddy terracing of Southeast Asia, but the quieter, functional kind found in parts of the Middle East and Europe. Low retaining walls, built from flat stone slabs, stacked without mortar, following the natural contour of the hillside, creating level platforms on a slope that would otherwise be impossible to cultivate or comfortably inhabit. University of New England archaeologist Dr. Patricia Hollis examined the site in 2015 and concluded that the formations were inconsistent with natural geology. The stones had been selected for flatness and stacked with evident purpose. Pollen analysis from soil samples taken from the terrace platforms revealed seed signatures consistent with intentional planting, and radiocarbon dates from charcoal fragments found within the terrace walls returned ages between 4,000, 200 and 5,000, 800 years before present. This predates European contact by more than 4 millennia and suggests that the people of the Blue Mountains were managing the landscape in sophisticated agricultural or semi-agricultural ways we have only recently begun to document. When Dr. Hollis presented her findings to a conference in Canberra in 2016, the response from some quarters was skepticism. From others, it was a more careful kind of silence that sometimes means the same thing. But the terraces are still there. They do not care about academic reception. The pollen dates don't lie, and the charcoal doesn't either. 4,000 years before the first fleet, someone was cultivating the Blue Mountains with a knowledge of soil and slope and seasonal water movement that we are still not fully able to explain. Structure number 4, the Mount York Stone Circle. Mount York, at the western edge of the Blue Mountains near Hartley, is where the early colonial explorers Blaxland, Lawson, and Wentworth finally found a way down from the plateau in 1813. What those explorers didn't record, or perhaps didn't notice in their exhausted relief at having found a descent at all, was a formation on the northern spur of the mount that only became a subject of formal inquiry in 2009. 11 large sandstone boulders, each weighing between 1 and 3 tons, arranged in an ellipse roughly 14 meters across. The boulders show no signs of natural deposition. They are not embedded in the hillside. They are sitting on it, positioned with their flattest faces, oriented toward a common center, and 2 of them have shallow depressions carved into their upper surfaces. The site was assessed by a geological survey team from the University of Wollongong, who confirmed the stones had not arrived at their current positions by any geological process they could identify. There are no exposed outcrops of similar stone type within 200 meters. Darug community members who visited the site described the formation as consistent with a ceremonial gathering place, a location where group decisions would have been made and where the sky would have been watched across seasons. 11 stones, an ellipse, carved depressions, and no natural explanation. That combination is worth sitting with. Structure number 5, the Wentworth Falls Cave Gallery. Below the main tourist track at Wentworth Falls, where most visitors stop at the lookout and turn back, a series of steep descents through heath and fern lead to a lower escarpment that very few people ever reach. In the cliff wall here, partially obscured by native shrubs that appear to have grown specifically across the entrance in the way plants sometimes colonize abandoned spaces, there is a cave, approximately 8 meters deep and 4 meters high at its mouth. The cave walls are covered in engravings, not the shallow pecked surfaces found in many Blue Mountains rock art sites, but deep carved channels, some of them running half a centimeter into the sandstone, in geometric patterns that include nested circles, parallel lines of consistent spacing, and a series of elongated oval shapes that appear in similar form at rock art sites in South Australia, South Africa, and the Arnhem Land Plateau. The presence of parallel design language across sites separated by thousands of kilometers, has been noted by comparative rock art researchers as a pattern requiring explanation. The level of weathering on the deepest engravings at Wentworth Falls has been assessed by Dr. Robert Fuller of Macquarie University as consistent with an age in excess of 15,000 years. If that figure is accurate, these carvings were made during the last ice age, when the Blue Mountains would have been colder, drier, and more exposed than they are today. The people making them were doing so in a world that looked fundamentally different from the landscape we see now. And yet they carved, and the carvings endured. Structure number 6. The Megalong Valley underground water system. The Megalong Valley sits below the plateau of the Blue Mountains, accessible by a single winding road that drops 600 meters in altitude in less than 5 kilometers. It is one of the most beautiful and least understood places in New South Wales. And beneath it, there is something that has been puzzling hydrologists since the 1990s. The valley floor receives considerably more water than rainfall and surface runoff can account for. Springs emerge from locations where the geology shouldn't support spring formation. Water tables fluctuate in ways inconsistent with seasonal patterns. In 2003, a team from CSIRO, investigating anomalous water behavior in the region, used dye tracing to follow subsurface water movement through the sandstone and found evidence of constructed channels, stone-lined passages that appeared to be directing groundwater from the plateau edge down to the valley floor in a controlled manner. Not all the passages were natural fissures. Some sections showed evidence of shaping, of deliberate modification to route water in a specific direction. The scale of what they were looking at, if indeed these were constructed features, would have represented an enormous engineering undertaking carried out across multiple generations. The full extent of the system has never been mapped. A hydrologist who worked on the 2003 study told a conference audience in 2018 that what they found beneath the Megalong Valley was, in her exact words, unlike anything in the published literature on pre-colonial Australian water management. She said it quietly, but she said it. Structure number 7. The Coutumba cliff face markings. Along the cliff face below Coutumba, accessible only by abseil or by traversing narrow ledges that most sane people would decline to walk, there are markings in the sandstone that have been known to the local climbing community for decades, but received almost no formal archaeological attention until 2017, when a heritage survey was conducted ahead of a proposed development near the escarpment edge. The survey team documented 23 distinct carved panels on cliff faces that face east, catching the morning light in a way that would make them readable from the valley below, or readable to someone standing on ledges that may have been more accessible in a different geological era. The markings include what appear to be maps, stylized representations of the canyon system as seen from above, which is interesting because the vantage point required to produce an accurate aerial representation of the canyon simply did not exist in pre-colonial times. Either the mapmakers climbed exceptionally high, or they had access to a spatial understanding of the landscape that came from deep generational familiarity with every ridge, descent, and drainage line of this extraordinarily complex terrain, accumulated across so many generations that the whole landscape existed as a mental map of extraordinary precision. That kind of knowledge is its own form of technology, and it leaves marks in stone. Structure number 8. The Bell Range Dolmen Formations. In the northern reaches of the Blue Mountains, near the Bell Range, where the plateau breaks into a series of long rocky ridges and the density of eucalypt gives way to more open heath, there are a number of formations that bear a striking resemblance to structures found in parts of Europe and the Middle East, known as dolmens. A dolmen is a megalithic structure consisting of 2 or more upright stones, supporting a flat horizontal capstone, creating a chamber beneath. They are found across a wide swathe of the ancient world, from Ireland to Korea, and their purpose is generally associated with burial or ceremony. The Blue Mountains examples, first formally documented by geologist Peter Chalmers in 2013, consist of upright sandstone slabs with horizontal capstones in configurations that natural geological processes cannot easily explain. The upright stones are in positions inconsistent with either deposition or in situ weathering. The capstones are too heavy to have been placed by wind or water. Chalmers, who went to the site as a skeptic, expecting to find nothing unusual, returned with measurements and photographs that he found genuinely difficult to categorize. He published a cautious paper in 2014, suggesting the formations warranted further investigation. That investigation has not yet occurred at any meaningful scale. The formations sit in the Bell Range, in the wind, in the long light of the Northern Plateau, waiting for the kind of serious, properly resourced investigation that they have never received. The question of whether dolmen-type structures appear on multiple continents because of shared deep human impulses, shared ancient knowledge networks, or simple coincidence of form is one of the genuinely open questions of world archaeology. The Blue Mountains examples sit right at the center of that question. Structure number 9, the Grose Valley subterranean chambers. The Grose Valley is one of the most remote and spectacular gorges in the Blue Mountains, a World Heritage Area in the fullest sense of that designation. Very few people reach its floor. The descent is long, the terrain is demanding, and the valley has a quality of silence when you get there that feels less like the absence of sound and more like the presence of something older than sound. In 2016, a joint expedition involving researchers from the Australian Speleological Federation and independent archaeologists documented a series of chambers in the northern wall of the valley that showed strong evidence of deliberate construction. The chambers were not natural caves. The entrances had been shaped, the floors had been leveled, and inside 3 of the chambers, the walls bore traces of pigment, the remnants of what may have been extensive painted surfaces, now largely destroyed by moisture and the passage of time. More significantly, the orientation of the chambers, each one positioned to receive light at a specific angle during the southern hemisphere winter, created a light effect that researchers from the University of Sydney's Department of Archaeology described as intentional and calendrical. These chambers may have served as a means of tracking seasonal time, of knowing when to move, when to plant, when to gather, when to perform ceremony. In the world, the Gundungurra people knew. In the world, their ancestors built across thousands of years of accumulated understanding that knowledge was not a convenience, it was survival, it was everything. Structure number 10, the Mount Solitary hidden enclosure. Mount Solitary is exactly what its name suggests, an isolated mesa rising from the floor of the Jameson Valley, surrounded on all sides by sheer cliffs that make access genuinely difficult. It is the kind of place that inspires stories, and it has inspired plenty of them. But one story is not a story at all. It is a documented site. On the southern plateau of Mount Solitary, reached after a half-day climb that most walkers describe as one of the more demanding in the mountains, there is a natural hollow in the sandstone that has been substantially modified. The hollow has been deepened. Its edges have been built up with carefully placed stone. The interior floor is level in a way that sandstone hollows never naturally achieve. And at its eastern end, 2 upright stones create a new and narrow gap that frames on the morning of the spring equinox, the exact point on the horizon where the sun rises. The structure is small. It would comfortably hold perhaps 12 people sitting close together. But its precision is extraordinary. The effort required to carry materials to this location, to spend time cutting and placing stone on the top of a mesa that takes hours to reach even today, with modern footwear on well-marked tracks, speaks to a purpose that went far beyond casual or accidental use. This was a place of great importance to the people who built it. You can feel that even now, standing in that hollow, looking east through the gap in the stones at the morning sky. So what does it mean, taken together? Each of these 10 sites represents a different kind of mystery, a different question about the depth and sophistication of human activity in the Blue Mountains across a time frame that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Some of the structures are about water management. Some are about astronomy. Some are about ceremony. Some may be about record keeping, about encoding geographical knowledge in carved stone surfaces so that it could be read and transmitted and updated across generations. Taken together, they suggest something that the standard narrative of Australian prehistory has been consistently slow to accommodate. That the Blue Mountains were not simply a barrier, not simply a wilderness traversed by nomadic hunters following seasonal game, but a managed, understood, and deeply inhabited landscape in which sophisticated technology, sophisticated social organization, and sophisticated knowledge systems were all continuously at work for a very long time. The Gundungurra and Darug peoples and their ancestors were here for at least 50,000 years. In that time, they developed what any honest assessment must call a civilization. Not one built from stone cities and written records, in the way that Western historical frameworks tend to privilege and recognize, but one built from knowledge, from relationship with country, from an understanding of landscape that ran deep enough to shape the stone itself. These structures are part of that civilization. They deserve the same serious, funded, sustained archaeological attention that would be lavished without hesitation on comparable sites discovered anywhere else on Earth. Until that happens, they remain hidden, not because they are invisible, because not enough people have chosen to look. If this story made you see the Blue Mountains differently, stay with this channel. There is so much more buried in this landscape, and we are only at the beginning of what the full picture might reveal. Leave a comment telling us which of these 10 sites you most want to know more about. And if you are in the mountains, if you are a local, a walker, someone who has pushed past the tourist lookouts into the deeper country and seen something that didn't make sense, we want to hear from you. Some of the most significant archaeological finds in Australian history have come from people who were simply paying close attention to where they were walking. The mountains always reward that careful attention.